Welcome back to Teach Me the Bible Stories with Miss Michelle. Today we will look at Genesis chapters 37 and 38, where Joseph tells his brothers about his dreams that make his brothers hate him even more. There will be 10 questions at the end. You can earn 100 points. First, those books of the Bible. 5 books of the law: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. 12 books of history: Joshua, Judges, Ruth, 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel, 1 Kings, 2 Kings, 1 Chronicles, 2 Chronicles. Now I want to teach you the next one. It's Ezra. We're using the ASL sign for arrive for the book of Ezra because in Ezra, the Jews, the people of Judah, arrive in Jerusalem. They had been in exile for 70 years, held captive in a foreign land. So in Ezra, we see the Jews and Ezra the priest arrive in Jerusalem. Now in Ezra, we see that not only did King Cyrus say that the Jews were free to return home to Judah, but King Cyrus said he would provide the materials needed for the Jews to rebuild the temple to the one true God. That temple had been destroyed 70 years earlier by the Babylonians, and now King Cyrus will help them to build the temple again. Okay, so for Ezra, we're using the sign for arrive. Now let's just do those 12 books of history that we've learned so far. 12 books of history: Joshua, Judges, Ruth, 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel, 1 Kings, 2 Kings, 1 Chronicles, 2 Chronicles, Ezra. Good job. Only 2 more to go. We'll finish the 12 books of history. Are you ready for today's story? Listen carefully. This story is from the Bible, God's holy word. In our last story, we saw that Rachel died giving birth to baby Benjamin. Israel, or Jacob, lost the wife he loved. Now all that he had left of Rachel was her 2 sons, Joseph and Benjamin. Now in Genesis chapter 37, Joseph is 17 years old. He's a teenager. And so Jacob, or Israel, sends Joseph out to work with his brothers, with the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah. But when his brothers start acting up, Joseph reports that back to his father. Joseph tells on his brothers. Of course, they did not appreciate that. Okay, so questions for you. Who was Joseph's mom? It was Rachel. And what happened to Rachel? She died giving birth to baby Benjamin. And how old was Joseph in Genesis chapter 37? 17 years old. He was a teenager. And when Joseph saw his brothers acting up, who did Joseph go and tell? Their father. Now the Bible tells us that Jacob, or Israel, loved Joseph more than his other sons. And he did something to show it too. Israel gave Joseph a special gift. He gave him a coat of many colors. None of the other brothers got that special gift, only Joseph. And so when his brothers saw that, they were jealous of Joseph and they began to hate him. Then Joseph had a dream, and he made a mistake of telling his brothers about this dream. He dreamed that he and his brothers were out binding sheaves of grain. Then all of a sudden, Joseph had a sheaf of grain that stood up, and then all his brothers' sheaves of grain bowed down to Joseph's. Well, when Joseph's brothers heard that, they said, "Do you really think that you will rule over us?" Well, Joseph had another dream. And again, he made a mistake of telling his family about this dream. He dreamed this time that he saw the sun, moon, and 11 stars bowing down to him. Well, when Israel, his father, heard that, he even fussed at Joseph. And he said, "Do you really think that your father, mother, and 11 brothers will bow down to you?" Okay, questions for you. What gift did Israel give Joseph that let it be known that Joseph was his favorite son? That coat of many colors. And when Joseph told his brothers about that first dream, about the dream where their sheaves bowed down to Joseph's, How did Joseph's brothers feel about Joseph? They hated him even more. And when Joseph told his family about his dream where the sun, moon, and 11 stars bowed down to him, who fussed at Joseph that time? Israel, Joseph's own father, fussed at him that time. Well, later, Joseph's brothers went out. They took their sheep out to find green pasture. And Israel told Joseph, hey, Joseph, your brothers are in Shechem. I want you to go and see if they're okay and how the flocks of sheep are doing, and then come back and report it to me. Well, they were in Shechem. Do you remember what happened in Shechem in our last story? Simeon and Levi killed all the men of Shechem. They took revenge because one young man had attacked their sister Dinah. And so they killed all the men of Shechem. They ended up having to leave Shechem because they were afraid that the neighboring peoples would come out and attack them. Well, now I'm sure that Israel was a little bit nervous for his sons to be in that area for fear that those neighboring people could try to take revenge on his sons. So Israel sends Joseph out to check on his brothers. Well, Joseph went on to Shechem, but he could not find his brothers there. One man spoke up and said, well, your brothers were here, but they've moved on to Dothan. So Joseph walked on further to Dothan. Well, as Joseph was headed towards his brothers saw Joseph coming from a distance. They could spot him from a distance. You know how? Because he was wearing that coat of many colors. Well, his brothers began to discuss what they wanted to do with Joseph. They said they wanted to kill him. They said, here comes the dreamer. Let's kill him and throw him in a pit. We will just say that he was eaten by a wild animal. Then we'll see what happens, what becomes of his dreams. Well, when Reuben, the oldest brother, heard all that, he tried to save Joseph. He said, let's not kill him. Let's just throw him in a pit. Well, Reuben planned on rescuing Joseph when his brothers were not around. But as soon as Joseph arrived, his brothers grabbed Joseph. They ripped off his coat of many colors, and then they threw him in a pit. Okay, when the brothers saw Joseph coming, they talked about what they wanted to do to him. All the brothers, except for Reuben, wanted to do what to Joseph? To kill him. Reuben said, just throw him in a pit. What did Reuben plan to do later when his brothers were not around? To rescue him. And what did the brothers take from Joseph as soon as he arrived? His coat of many colors. And what did they throw Joseph into? A pit. Now Joseph's brothers sat down to eat while Joseph was in that pit. And as they were eating, they saw coming up from a distance a caravan of Ishmaelite traders. Now, Ishmaelite traders would buy and sell goods. They would also buy and sell slaves. Now, they were Ishmaelites. That means they were descendants from Ishmael, the son that Abraham had with Hagar. So as the brothers saw this caravan of Ishmaelite traders coming their way, Judah spoke up. And Judah said, well, what good would it do us to kill Joseph? Why don't we sell him to those Ishmaelite traders, and then we can at least make some money? Well, all the brothers that were there agreed, but Reuben was not there. Reuben was out with the sheep. So the brothers pulled Joseph out of that pit, and they sold him to the Ishmaelite traders. They sold him as a slave. Well, when Reuben returned and he found out what happened, he was so upset. He ended up tearing his clothes because he was so upset that they had done that to Joseph. But it was too late. There was nothing Reuben could do to rescue Joseph at that point. So all the brothers came up with a plan to deceive their father. They took that coat of many colors and they dipped it in goat's blood. Then they took that to their father and showed him Joseph's coat. They were making Israel believe that Joseph had been eaten by a wild animal. Well, Israel was so upset at that point. His heart was broken. His children tried to comfort him, but he could not be comforted. But meanwhile, Joseph was taken to Egypt. Joseph was sold as a slave to Potiphar. Potiphar worked for Pharaoh. He was the captain of the guards. Okay, questions for you. Which brother came up with the idea to sell Joseph as a slave? Judah. And which brother did not agree to the plan because he was out with the sheep? He wasn't even there? Reuben. And what did the brothers show their father to make him believe that Joseph was eaten by a wild animal? His coat dipped in goat's blood. And what country was Joseph taken to where he was sold to Potiphar? To Egypt. Now, Judah was the brother who had that plan to sell Joseph as a slave to those Ishmaelite traders. Well, not long after Joseph was sold, Judah moved away and started a family of his own. Judah ended up having twin sons with Tamar. Now, as Tamar was giving birth to these twins, Zerah reached out his arm first. So the midwife tied a scarlet thread around Zerah's arm so they would know who that firstborn son was. But then Zerah pulled back his arm and all of a sudden Perez burst forth. The name Perez means burst forth because Perez surprised everyone. They thought Zerah would be born first, but Perez burst forth and he surprised everyone. He was the firstborn. Well, I'm telling you about Judah, Tamar, and Perez because we see their names in the New Testament. We see their names in Matthew chapter 1. In fact, Tamar is the first woman mentioned in the New Testament. In Matthew chapter 1, we see a genealogy starting with Abraham going to Jesus Christ. Now, a genealogy is records of the family line. God had given that covenant promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob that through their family line, all the nations of the earth would be blessed. Of course, we know that the way that all the nations of the earth would be blessed because Jesus was going to come through that family line. So in Matthew chapter 1, verses 2 and 3, it says Abraham fathered Isaac. Isaac fathered Jacob. Jacob fathered Judah and his brothers. Judah fathered Perez and Zerah by Tamar. Perez fathered Hezron. And then it keeps going and going on and on until you get to Jesus. So we see from those verses in Matthew chapter 1 that Jesus came from the line of Judah, from that family line of Judah. Jesus was from the tribe of Judah. So we know that Jesus came from that family line from Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and then Judah. Now the rest of Genesis is mainly going to talk about Joseph. But I want you to know that Jesus came from the family line of Judah. Now we're going to learn a lot more about Joseph. Joseph has to go through some great difficulty, but it's all for a purpose. God ends up using Joseph in a mighty way to rescue the lives of many, many people. But I wanted you to know that Jesus came from the family line of Judah. Okay, so Jesus comes from the family line of which son of Israel? Judah. And in chapter 1 of what book do we see the names Judah, Tamar, and Perez? In Matthew chapter 1. Now the twins were Perez and Zerah. Which one ended up coming out first and had a name that means burst forth? Perez. Okay? Are you ready for your 10 questions? Just hit the pause button if you need a little bit more time after each question. Question 1. What gift did Israel give Joseph that let it be known that Joseph was his favorite son? Time, a coat of many colors. Number 2, when the brothers saw Joseph coming, they talked about what to do to him. All the brothers except for Reuben wanted to do what to Joseph? Time to kill him. Number 3, Reuben said, just throw him in a pit. What did Reuben plan to do later when his brothers weren't around? Time to rescue him, to pull him out. Number 4, what did the brothers take from Joseph after he arrived? Time, that coat of many colors. Number 5, what did they throw Joseph into? What did the brothers throw Joseph into? Time, a pit. Number 6, which brother came up with the idea to sell Joseph as a slave? Time, Judah. Number 7, what did the brothers show their father to make him believe that Joseph was eaten by a wild animal? Time, that coat dipped in goat's blood. Number 8, what country was Joseph taken to where he was sold to Potiphar? Time, Egypt. Number 9, Jesus comes from the family line of which son of Israel? Time, Judah. And number 10, last question. The twins were Perez and Zerah. Which one ended up coming out first and had a name that means burst forth? Time, Perez. Okay, how many did you get right? Now multiply that by 10 and that's your score. Now I have 2 assignments for you. I want you to go read Genesis chapter 37 and then I want you to go tell someone what you learned today. Come back for our next video in our Teach Me the Bible Story series. See you next time.